No Escape by Peter Kalu. Black British crime fiction has been in intensive care for a long time. Various authors have come running with resource paddles and tried to jolt it back into life, but the body stubbornly resists revival. This story we delve into some possible whys. It will dig up and dissect the long dead crime fiction body of the past, then mop up and microscopically examine the blood on the operating floor. It will nod to some promising texts and finally give brief pointers to the chance for a sustained revival and how that might occur. Obeying the rule of crime fiction that a dead body should be produced as early as possible, may I present The Dead Body, Britain's first black crime fiction writer, who would run a bandage trailing mile from such a description, was the white-passing M.P. Shiel. He was quasi-famous in his time, 1865 to 1947, for the 100% heroin-laced Gothic meets Sherlock Holmes madman hero stories of the super-intelligent, super-racist, aristocratic amateur detective Prince Zaleski. Scary? You bet. M.P. Shiel would have had Edgar Allan Poe hiding behind the sofa. Yes, let me bludgeon you with it. The very first black crime fiction author was an out-and-out racist, and so committed to the idea of a white super race that he wrote macabre short story after short story extolling it. Some things are best left dead. Let's backpedal a little into theory. Biological concept of race is now sunk without trace, according to the British Ghanaian American philosopher Anthony Appiah. But race retains its momentum as a way of socially classifying, despite its scientific bankruptcy, and with huge effects. Black equals crime has been a go-to racial stereotype beloved of politicians, happy to deploy demonizing, criminalizing language to assist at the ballot box, from the war on drugs to rivers of blood to hostile environment. No wonder many black writers are, as Mike Phillip puts it, wary of the genre. For those who enter, there's no escape. In representations, Stuart Hall suggests artists in general cannot escape racist stereotypes. These are embedded in language and suffused through the signs and codes of society. From property advertising, where white is clean, buildings surrounded by lots of white people, even if in a totally black area, to washroom design, automatic taps that only trigger for white hands, to programming, artificial intelligence suspicious activity algorithms drawn from the prejudices of white programmers. Unable to escape stereotypes or the dominant regime of representation, Hall argues we can only negotiate them, and in crime fiction, that negotiation is acute. In Out of the Woodpile, the African-American academic Frankie Bailey created a taxonomy of stereotypes in the US crime fiction genre that included the hypersexualized violent young buck, the childlike Sambo, the mummy, and the tragic mulatto. To these, we can add the more recent Muslim terrorist and more. Stuart Hall, however, finds a number of ways in which artists negotiate these reductive stereotypes. I will apply his insights here to examples from the British black and brown crime fiction genre. 1. Supercharging the stereotype. This entails making a positive out of a negative, in the same way that the Black is Beautiful slogan reclaimed black and made it a foundation of black pride. In crime, it means taking the stereotype and, instead of fighting it, turning up the dial, a strategy that explains the success of the blaxploitation films. If we are forced to be criminals, then we will be the most stylish, violent, and don't give a fuck uber criminals ever known. Within British crime fiction, Victor Headley's Yardie series, Donald Gorgon's Cop Killer, Colin Smith's Full Crew, and Simon Mears' The Khan all hit this note. Novels using this technique are often best-selling and also generally shunned by the literary establishment. They uniformly feature working-class protagonists acting out of desperate circumstances. They are written mostly in a tell-it-like-it-is journalistic style, including detailed location descriptions, accurate street names, and the occasional op-ed or Dickensian-style commentary on how the protagonist's troubles and excesses have been caused by a combination of deprivation and racism. 2. Broadening the regime. The second response is what Hall called broadening the regime of representation. This involves the creation of characters who are positioned to be the antithesis of the stereotype. It is one of the most popular strategies among black writers. Mike Phillips does not feature the criminal activities of black populations in any significant way in his Sam Dean crime series. Instead, Phillips makes the black lead protagonist an investigator, someone commissioned to investigate criminality, not someone steeped in it. Nicola Williams can be understood to adopt this strategy too in her legal thriller Without Prejudice, which features the upstanding black female barrister Lee Mitchell, as does Sunny Singh with her war photographer protagonist Sam in Hotel Arcadia. Social mobility is an aspect of many of these broadening narratives. Whereas working class protagonists show a deep knowledge of and an intense attachment to locale, the middle class journalist or investigating lawyer moves about from location to location, from working class backdrop to middle class, and with an implicit or overt commentary on difference. Legal thrillers are on the rise here in the UK, probably as a result of so many more black and brown lawyers turning their hand to crime fiction or making themselves available for black writers doing research. In this category is Kia Abdullah's acclaimed legal thriller Truth Be Told. Yvette Edwards' The Mother is also impressive for its deep understanding of courtroom procedure and the underlying emotions for those who attend a trial. A further noticeable example of this broadening strategy is when the main protagonist is turned into a police officer, a shift from robber to cop. This is the case in Jacob Ross's riveting Caribbean island detective Digger of The Bone Readers and Black Rain Falling, Vijay Metia's taciturn Mumbai cop in the Deputy Commissioner Shaktawat series, Nee Park's young forensic pathologist Kayo in Tale of the Bluebird, and Vasim Khan's female detective Persis Wadya in Midnight at Malabar House. It's worth noting the sheer number of novels in this strand which are set outside the UK, as if setting a novel in the UK were an insufferable hairshirt for those wanting to write characters who escape the reductive stereotypes. 3. The counter-narrative. A close reading of Courtney Newland's The Scholar and Snakeskin, of Colleen Smith's novels Moss Side Massive and Full Crew, or of Dredda A. Mitchell's Killer Tune, suggests a further strategy, that of using a counter-narrative to contest the stereotypical reduction of the dominant narrative. In Killer Tune, the narrative and counter-narrative are sometimes set in close opposition, so when Lord Tribulation flicks through the newspaper, he reads of himself being described in reductive outlaw terms, catching words like defective, dangerous, and destructive. Countering this narrative from the press, the reader is shown throughout the novel the depth of Lord Tribulation's cultured musicology, and alerted also to the fact that he had never broken the law in his life. Newland's The Scholar follows the lives of criminals and those hovering on the edge of delinquency. However, Newland gives them, as he states in For the Kill, complexity, including by painting detailed psychological portraits of his characters that provide a sustained focus on the character's intimate feelings, ambitions, and fears. Colleen Smith takes similar pains to give a convincing and complex internal life to those of her characters who exceed the law. The strategy adopted by Mitchell, Newland, and Smith suggests an ongoing dialectic in which stereotypical representation is answered by counter-narrative. 4. Subverting the stereotype from within. Helen Oyeyemi's Mr. Fox, with its metafictive addressing of the genre's negative tropes, may be considered to fit most closely the subverting strategy, albeit Oyeyemi's focus is on the stereotypical positioning of women rather than black people. Diran Adebayo's My Once Upon a Time and B. Vandeli's The Street, with their literary knowingness and broad range of highly individualized non-delinquent characters, employ aspects of both the broadening and the subversion from within strategies. To these may be added the short stories of Marcel Peter Kalu in the biting satire of Getting Home, and the playfulness around the genre's conventions of The Adventures of Maud Mellington, Part 1, Dirty Laundry. 5. Entryism, also known as Trotsky's French turn. Entryism is the strategy of working within a genre and at first merely replicating the genre's white conventions and so making no mention of the effects of a racialized society on characters, nor even featuring any significant black or brown characters in the fiction produced. The approach has a fine and reputable tradition. The revered Mallory Blackman has spoken of how she got a foothold in children and young adult markets by deliberately not describing her characters as black. So too, Patrice Lawrence has said, "Until my 30s, I always wrote white characters." In the crime genre, Dredda A. Mitchell's Geezer Girls and Imran Khan's I Know What I Saw walk somewhere along this line. The hardcover of Mahmoud's excellently crafted I Know What I Saw, for instance, features a large photograph of the author on its back flap. Yet the narrative is silent on race. The white male narrator has no thoughts on the matter, neither exhibiting any racism nor noticing it anywhere. Not everyone turns. The problem with the French turn or entryist strategy is that some find the replication environment so congenial they abandon all plans of turning. That said, Patrice Lawrence has since gone on to write Orange Boy, featuring a young male black protagonist and situated full square in the counter-narrative strand. Blackman, of course, went on to write the spectacular Noughts and Crosses series, speculating on racial role reversals. 6. Accommodationism. In Abir Mukherjee's Smoke and Ashes, from the Captain Sam Wyndham series, a white protagonist struggles with a Sherlock Holmes-esque heroin addiction in 1920s Calcutta. It is a cozy Raj fiction written in the spirit of Agatha Christie. Both of Wasim Khan's India set Baby Ganesh Agency and Malabar House Crime series also deploy the genre's golden age whodunit structures, using nods to both Agatha Christie and Conan Doyle to soften the oblique vista offered of brutal British colonialism at work. The success of such fiction, and it sells in its millions, calls to mind Salman Rushdie's comment, "The popularity of Raj fictions puts one in mind of the phantom twitchings of an amputated limb." It remains true that the generally snuffed out Indian versions of colonial history remain so in many texts, the many ghastly depredations the population suffered at the hands of the British being most often noises off in relation to the central narrative. No chief inspector tinkering at the historical edges of a cosy fiction can fully explore such grim history. As Audre Lorde put it, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Conclusion. This brings us to a wider problem of the crime fiction genre. According to several commentators, the investigator, whether private or public strand, of crime fiction presents particular ideological challenges to black writers. Peter Messent, in the Crime Fiction Handbook of 2012, has outlined how the suggestion embedded in the subgenre that one individual, such as the investigator, can find a solution to a crime, and by metonymic implication that all society's problems may be solved by individual acts, is a problematic that may stymie black writers. Commenting on the crime fiction of African American writer Chester Himes, Messent suggests that, faced with the largest social injustice, detective work in Himes' last completed novel Blind Man with a Pistol is rendered pointless and irrelevant in the novel's ending. The resolution by individual Superman formula has also been queried by Ernest Mendel in Delightful Murder. Andrew Pepper, too, in his chapter on black crime fiction in the Contemporary American Crime Novel of 2000, notes the difficulty that black writers face negotiating the basic premise of the genre that individual solutions to larger social problems can be achieved. It appears that, from this conundrum too, there is no escape. Yet, rather than end on such a bleak note, you must go on, as Samuel Beckett in The Unnameable put it. Books inspire. They speculate on possible new worlds and cause shifts of consciousness and understanding. What does the future hold? Plenty. Charles Zepka reminds us of the crime fiction genre's tendency to fission and fusion, and John Skaggs notes the genre's flexibility and porosity. My own impression is that the genre needs to funk things up more, both stylistically and thematically, that realism needs to be dethroned, and other styles allowed to hybridize the genre. "We murder to dissect," said William Wordsworth, "but now I down my scalpel." and mop the blood